Do you think you have a good idea for a consumer product, but you have no clue how much it'll cost and how much time is involved to bring it to market? Have you never set up a business and around a physical product and then went through the entire development phase and then the sales strategy, marketing strategy, and then gone through to getting your product into store shelves or online? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Most people that have good ideas and have an interest in pursuing a product invention don't take it that far. There are a lot of good reasons not to proceed with a good idea. The most common one might be that there's other competitors already on the market. There might be existing patents that are still active that completely block you out of pursuing it. And there's a few other ways to determine how good your idea is and whether it's worth putting in all that energy to bring it to market. It's pretty common for me to get new first-time clients on their initial visit, sit down, and they're very excited about the product. We'll sign a one-way NDA that protects their disclosure so that I can't steal their IP. I wouldn't anyway, but it's a good thing to have people sign NDAs when telling them your secret information. Then they tell me their idea. Sometimes I can intuitively, instantly realize that it's a great idea. Other times I'm not so sure because maybe I'm not as familiar with that particular industry, or it just requires some research and digging to see whether there's already competitors or other good reasons not to pursue that idea. It just depends on what the solution is, what the product is. It's very common for these inventors or people that want to be inventors, after they express their idea to me in a lot of excitement, to ask me what I think about it. And I'll give them the honest truth on what I think. But the reality is there's no way to even go through that initial consulting meeting and have a really strong stance on whether it's a good idea or not, because I haven't done any of the research to see whether it is yet. Now, hopefully you, with your idea or this prospective client, has already done a little bit of research before they approached me or their designer. This should, at least at a bare minimum, involve going through Google and searching for the product to see whether it exists already. Go to Amazon, to Walmart, just to typical places and see whether you can find it by typing in keywords into an online search. Now, that's the very first step in deciding whether or not you should pursue a product. I think most people do not understand what's involved and what it takes to bring a good quality product to market. It is a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, sometimes literally, if you're building prototypes. So the development process of making your idea come into physical reality and all the way through prototyping, that development process is just one piece of the puzzle that it takes to bring a product all the way to store shelves. There is a sales strategy. There is building your own company. There is a marketing and branding strategy, building a website, getting government-related regulatory concerns taken care of, making sure that your product passes all these regulations set forward by your state or federal government. There are sales tax licenses. You have to spin up your own company, whether it's an LLC or some other type of corporation. You have to decide whether you have partners, what the shared ownership is in the company, who does what, whether you need employees right off the bat or you're saving that for down the road. You have to figure out what your budget is and at least have enough financing to pay for the next thing that's coming up. Typically, first-time inventors will work through their savings pretty far through the development process, and at some point run into a situation where they're starting to get a little uncomfortable with how much money they've spent, and they realize they need to secure external funding, whether that's from family and friends, a venture capitalist, a bank loan, a line of credit. There's a lot of ways to get money, but you need a decent amount of money to get you through the development process. Now, like I said, that is just the development process is just one piece of the puzzle. It's going to cost a lot more money for all the other elements. So if you're really serious about pursuing your product, expect to spend somewhere between 50 and a couple $100,000 setting up your company and getting the product fully designed to perfection, ready for market. Then expect to pay another 50 to a couple $100,000 in getting your first batch of parts made, whether that's 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever quantity units you buy. Then a bunch more money for marketing and branding and a sales strategy. You might be hiring outside consultants for that are totally separate from the consultants you used for the design phase. There's just so much involved. And I don't say this to scare anyone off. I just want to bring forward the realities of what you have to consider here to make a responsible decision. At some point, I joined the military after high school, and I did not do enough research. I was a stubborn young person. I did not dive in far enough into what it would really be like. I didn't ask people that had already done it what their experience was like. I was just stubborn and I jumped in. Now, I don't regret joining, but I would have had a very different view of what it really would be like than what I had, and I went into it blind. So going into a design project blind can be very scary, and it's ill-advised. You could find yourself spending most of your savings going down this path, and then at some point something arises, some new constraint that wasn't identified earlier, something you find out later, like some big company just got a patent granted that you couldn't find before, and it blocks you out, and maybe you've spent a bunch of money. So I understand the gravity of the situation. It's a big decision. I mean, stopping your normal life and maybe even quitting your job, or if you're in retirement, and spending your life savings and diverting your whole focus into a new venture is possibly as consequential as having a kid, getting married, deciding what career path you want to have in life. These really, really big things. So if you feel insecure about your idea or unconfident, what I would suggest doing is following along with me, writing down what these steps are so that you can get a better sense of whether your product has a chance on the market. Now, there's no way of knowing whether you'll succeed, even if everything checks out and it's a completely novel invention and it's not that expensive to make, you get a patent granted, the development goes smoothly, you have working prototypes, you get funding. Even if all the stars align, it's still not guaranteed to be successful. There are external factors like how the economy's doing, whether your target market customer will identify with your branding. Now that's a little silly because you would think the product's quality should drive its success, but that's not always true. There are certain industries where the branding is even more important than the product itself. You'll have to consider what profit margins are, and there's just steep learning curves involved with every step of this process. So, with that healthy dose of reality given out, I'm going to jump into some things you can look at to evaluate whether your product has a chance. The very first thing, like I mentioned briefly earlier, is to do a quick Google search. First, just use the standard search on google.com. Type in a bunch of keywords that you think are similar to what your idea is or explain what your product is, and then go a few pages deep into all of these relevant descriptors that might be what your product could be called. When you go a few pages deep, dive into some links, see if it already exists. This is going to be step one. Now, to make this a little stronger of an initial search, after you go through the standard method of searching, toggle over on Google to Google Images. You'd be surprised, and a lot of things will pop up in the images that you weren't able to find in the word descriptors on the primary search page. So go do the same thing with the keywords and go a few pages deep with each keyword, see if you can find anything. You might have to dive into some blogs, into Etsy or Pinterest to see if it's already been done. Sometimes your product isn't actually released and on sale, so going to the shopping section of Google is maybe useful, but it might not be for sale. There might be people that did a DIY version of it but never brought it to market. So just see what you can find. Now, the last initial search I would recommend is using something like ChatGPT or whatever the flavor of the month AI is at the time that can do search. You can, give it some context, explain what your invention idea is, say you're not sure what it might be called, and ask it to try to scour the web and find similar things. You're probably likely to find something using that you were not able to find using the image and standard search. As you go, I would recommend having a simple Word document open on your computer or a piece of paper, if nothing else, and just write down serious competitors that are actually similar to your idea. Typically, most products, there will be several existing competitors doing something like it already out there. Maybe it doesn't have all the same features of yours, and that's okay. But if it has a chance, if that product that you found has a chance of being a competitor to yours when yours is on the market, write it down, record it. There will be a period later in time, if you pass all these checks and jump over all these hurdles, that you decide it is worth proceeding with your product. You're going to look back at this initial research and then go much deeper into it at that point. There's no point in wasting a ton of time, a lot of your life, going too deep too early. But you will have a research phase later on if you decide to proceed with the product. So take notes. Okay, that's your kind of initial search, and you can call that a competition research, just very basic. The next one would be a little more difficult if you've never done it before, but this is a patent search. Now you can pay attorneys or patent agents that are out there to do what is called a patent search. Sometimes they call it a prior art search. It might be called a patentability opinion that you pay them a few $1,000s for. What they're going to do is they're going to spend a few hours with their advanced techniques on the USPTO website, and they're going to dive real deep to see if there's any existing patents out there similar to your product. Now, you'd be surprised. There could be products in totally different industries that look nothing like what you plan on making that could still be of concern for you to infringe, especially if there's a mechanism involved that's critical to the performance, but it's already locked up by some other company somewhere in an unrelated product. So that's the best way to do a patent search, is to pay an attorney or an agent. But again, if you're super early, if you're looking to not spend $1 and just do this yourself up front, you can go to Google Patents and just Google the words Google Patents. It'll direct you to a subsection of their site, and you can keyword search yourself and see what you find. Oftentimes, there are people that get patents approved and granted and then never make it to market with that product. Sometimes it's because they ran out of funding or motivation or had health issues. Or it could be a big company that got a patent on something just specifically to block anyone else from using that technology. Maybe even themselves. Maybe they never even planned to pursue that product. They just want to block people out. Sadly, that is common as well. So you might find some interesting things in the patent databases that you didn't find in general searches. Okay, the next checklist item is to try and assess the novelty of your idea. How innovative is it? Is it solving a brand new problem that no one else has ever solved before? That would be good. Pretty unlikely, but it's possible. More likely, you became frustrated using something that's already on the market and decided, oh, I could do this much better. I can add these 3 extra features and make them higher performance than all the 5 versions that I bought from different places that are all garbage. So you need to decide how innovative it is. This, if you're not used to bringing products to market, this is going to be a difficult task because you just haven't seen a lot out there to compare against. So for this section, I would try to talk to people you know carefully, as well as a professional designer if you can, and get their opinion on how novel the idea is. The next step is to do what I call a product fit determination. This is to see whether your product is going to make it in that particular industry or with your particular target markets. You might have one primary target market and a few other ones that will make up a minority of your sales that you kind of expect of the types of people that might buy your product. You might only have one target market. That's okay. What you're going to want to do is see if people within that market identify with your product and not only see it and say, oh yeah, okay, that exists, but that also show some excitement and say, oh yeah, I would buy that. That's the kind of feedback you're looking for, is people within that market. Oftentimes, if it is you who came up with the idea, then you are probably in one of those target markets yourself. So that's one data point I would suggest getting more. But it goes a little deeper than just making sure your target markets align with your product, but the timing actually matters. You'll see it sometimes with really innovative companies or companies that are just ahead of their time. I think like right now, VR companies are experiencing this. Like I truly believe that in a few years, VR is going to be very popular and widespread, but they released so early and it was such a departure from anything else that existed. It was so innovative that it kind of scared people, or people just want to ignore it and pretend like it doesn't exist. Human psychology will be involved in the adoption of your product or not. So is the timing right for your idea? It's a little hard to guess that, but it might be relevant to your case. The next step is to dive a little bit deeper with surveys. First, I would recommend doing what I call internal surveys. These are to people that you trust very deeply, your immediate best friends and your immediate family, people that you expect will not harm you in the future by stealing your idea or causing some kind of drama like that. Now, I'm going to say something that sounds a little weird, but it is smart to get anyone that hears your idea to sign an NDA before you tell them what the idea is. If you truly believe in that idea and you think it is such a good one that you want to dedicate your life to making it a reality, you need to get these NDAs signed. Now that can get awkward with family members and close friends. They're going to think there's a trust issue. So I understand that in reality, most people are not going to have their internal close loved ones sign an NDA when they tell them the idea. I get it. That's just how it goes. But it is advisable. I think any lawyer would tell you too. It's just safe. But if you decide not to, I get it. So you do some internal surveys. Now, these surveys, people don't like writing down responses or even typing them in an email. People get annoyed. They start to check out mentally and start to want to do something else with their time. So then you'll start getting low quality results, and you'll get people that, love you that just say, oh, I don't want to do that. That's annoying. I don't want to deal with that. So what might be a better strategy for these kind of more intimate surveys is to do it verbally. Give them a phone call, ask if you can record the call. If you're lucky, get some footage, turn the camera on your phone, ask them if you can do that, and then just start asking them some questions and what they think about it. And if they ask, why are you asking to record me? Say, well, I want to refer to your responses later. Sometimes it's not just the response itself that's important, but the emotional reaction of the person could be enlightening. If you explain the problem and then the solution and how your product solves the problem, and they get very excited, and you can see it in their face, and their eyes get big, and their eyebrows go up. I mean, those are, body signals that indicate that they're interested, and that is a good indicator for you. Now, none of this is truly necessary to make the decision to go forward with a product, but it's useful data points to collect, and you're going to run into some loved ones that don't like your idea, that think it's too big of a risk or think that the target market wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't dismiss them or be rude to them. Just say thank you, thank you for your opinion, and just consider that one data point among many. Now, if you're getting most of your loved ones telling you it's not a good idea, that might be a red flag, okay? So those are internal surveys. You're also, while you're doing these surveys, people don't like to be asked multiple times for multiple surveys. So ask them all the questions that they'll let you ask until they get annoyed. This might be 10 or less questions. Among those, after you explain the product's purpose and intent, and the problems that it solves, after you clearly explain that to them and you feel like they have an understanding of it, you want to get an idea from them what they might pay for something like that. So you say, what would be What would be on the low end of what you might pay for that? Or what would be so high? What's your high end? And you just start getting these ranges, and that starts being useful for later. As you'll see, I have something coming up called MSRP pricing analysis, and you'll want those data points, so collect them if you can. After you do your internal surveys and you still decide everything is worth pursuing, you should do external surveys. Now, these are with people you're not so close with. It might be, your kids' friends' parents, or friends of friends, or people that go to your religious institution, or coworkers that you're not best friends with, but you still want their opinion of. People that you have some trust in, but not as intimate as your loved ones. Now, for all these people, I would recommend getting them to sign an NDA. There are ways to present it to them that are a little less awkward. Be like, listen, my lawyer advised me that I just get everyone to sign this NDA. Do you mind? It doesn't really mean, it just means that you can't steal the idea from me, but I would love your valuable input. Kind of present it like that, and a lot of people will say, oh, okay, whatever, I don't care, I'll sign it. And then keep those NDA documents, scan them in, make copies. If you end up pursuing the product later, it's just important to keep it under wraps if you can. Then again, there are marketing strategies where you release the information early, but that's a topic for another video. So you conduct external surveys. These are going to be the same questions and same presentation style as you gave to your internal people. The only difference is that you got an NDA signed first. Okay, now you're going to want to do what I call the next step. It is a feature review. So if you have a product, more often than not, it is just an innovation on existing products that are already on the market. It might have 2 additional features than anything else has. Or it might simply be better. It might have the exact same type of features as all the other existing competitors, but you're just wanting to solve them better than what's already out there. Maybe you're unsatisfied with that product that you bought on Amazon, and you just simply want to replicate the idea. Should have some tweaks, though, so you don't infringe on their patents and their copyrights. But you do a feature review. So you list out all the features your product might have. Then you cross-check those features with what existing competitors have for features and see if it's already been satisfied. If you have 4 features, and all the competitors on the market have already resolved 2 of those features really well, and you don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with the way they did those 2, then maybe your point of differentiation between yourself and them, the thing that's going to make your product sell versus competitors already out there, would reside in the remaining 2 features. Maybe they do one feature adequately, but not good enough, and you think it could be better. So that could be a little point of differentiation and a slight innovation on what's out there. And maybe one of your features is completely novel, and just no one else has integrated that into their product yet. Now, you don't know yet till you do even more research whether those features are going to make the cut in the product that you end up launching. It's okay if you don't identify all of them, or if you identify too many at this point and have to cut some out later. That's all okay. It's part of the process. But this is all to give you a better understanding of what you're dealing with in terms of competition. And kind of full circle, how innovative your product is. So the next pretty important step that's going to be very hard for you to do by yourself. I would recommend doing this with some designer who's brought products to markets before, or talk to if you know a company that manufactures products, you can kind of ask them what they think about this. But this next step is a raw cost estimate. Eventually, you'll need to know whether the profit margin is feasible for you to succeed as a business with this idea. I'll give you some examples. We all know the company Crocs. They make the foam shoes. Now, I'm sure a lot of money and time and effort went into finding the exact right formulation of that foam mixture. I'm sure it's proprietary. It's pretty high quality foam. But when they actually go to make a set of Crocs, they're probably paying less than $1 in raw materials for the the foam amounts, maybe a couple bits of plastic that they make by the millions. Very, very cheap raw cost for them. Now then there's packaging, so that costs another $1 or $2, maybe less if it's Crocs and they just hang them on a hook. But then there's also other overhead involved. There's all the marketing and sales and a full company's worth of staff. So there is a lot of overhead involved that isn't easy to guess what it costs. But you can guess what the raw cost might be. For simple components like Crocs, it's going to be less than a few dollars. For some very expensive things like bicycles or laboratory equipment or robots, it's going to be much more expensive of a raw cost. What you're going to need to do is, in your mind, based on your previous survey responses and your intuition, you need to guess what the MSRP might be of this product, or what the range might be of what you might sell it for when it's fully done. Just hypothetically, if it's designed really perfect or up to your standards, what you think people would pay for it on the market. Now, if this is your MSRP up here and your raw cost is down here, the difference between the two is your profit. A lot of that profit leaves in expenses and payroll and marketing and branding and sales and fulfillment. You know, Amazon takes a cut. A lot of these stores will take a small cut out of the MSRP. That's how they make their money. You can't know what all these cuts are going to be and the exact ratios you're going to need to succeed as a business, but you can get a decent indicator pretty often by knowing the MSRP and a decent raw cost, whether you'll be successful. I would say bare minimum, you need a 2x profit margin. So if your raw cost on your product is $10, you need to sell it for at least $20. Now that is bare bones to be successful as a company making a physical product. What is more ideal is something in the ballpark of 5 to 10x profit margin. This, again, just depends on your idea. Crocs, brand new, can sell for $60, $65. That's a 60x profit margin if it only cost them $1 to make a set. So that's kind of on the extreme end of what is possible but not very common. You're going to want to aim for between 2 and 10x for most products. If your calculations are showing that the MSRP of what people would pay for it is only slightly higher than what you would expect to pay for it, right there I would call that a roadblock and kind of stop your pursuit. I haven't mentioned this yet, but if at any point in this checklist, as you go through it one step at a time, you see a serious roadblock or a hurdle that's just too high or too intimidating, maybe you need to stop. Or maybe you need to consult other people, see if their views align with your assumptions, and well, basically see if their fears align with your fears. And if they do, just stop right there and call it a day. If in extreme doubt, I would go to a existing product designer of some kind, a freelancer, get their opinion on it. A lot of times, well, what we do in my studio and what I know a lot of other freelancers and studios do is they offer a free initial consultation. So you can go in, take about an hour of their time or less, and tell them your idea, see what they say. They'll have a much better intuition on whether it's feasible or not. So after you've made it past these checkpoints, you're going to want to, and let's say you still think it's a good idea and you still think it has a good chance on the market after all the brief cursory research you've done so far. Then consolidate your Word document or your notes, record them nice and cleanly so that you can reference them later, because this is going to serve as your first point of research when you dive into the research phase, when you actually start developing the product. If you are working with a design firm, they can do all of these steps for you and then give you a report, basically with all these steps itemized and broken out really clearly. They might have better ways to acquire the information than you. There are a lot of psychological methods to getting good responses from surveys, for example. For MSRP pricing, there's a few different models, including the Van Westendorp pricing model. You can Google that. Forbes has a good article on it. And it's basically a series of 4 questions. You ask someone and you get an accurate range of what they might pay for a product. There's other models like that. There are external surveys that are launched digitally. So if you're just looking for high-level information, you can go to surveymonkey.com, and there's some others. What you do there is you can filter down to your target market demographics, at least get pretty close most of the time. Send out your survey to these respondents, and then you have to pay per the response. So if you get 1,000 responses, you might be paying $1.50 per response. It's $1,500 to get 1,000 data points on something. Just keep in mind that that data is fairly low quality relative to personal interviews and surveys that you conduct yourself with people in person. A lot of those online platforms, they might give you an okay sense or a general feeling of guidance, but the specifics aren't accurate. A lot of those respondents are sitting there all day long just taking surveys because they get a few pennies for each one that they complete, which incentivizes them to fly through the survey and not take the questions seriously or to heart. So there's just each one of these steps. You can dive so deep into the methodology of how to evaluate them. If you're feeling overwhelmed or like this is a lot of work, go to a design studio and ask for their help. You can either ask for an entire report where they might charge you a set fee of a few $1,000s for all this, or maybe they charge you by the hour. You might even be able to negotiate, okay, I can handle these 4 steps, but I need you to handle these other 4. And between the two of you, you can get some good information and evaluate it. I want to drive home the point that no matter what information you get, even if you get all green lights all through the checklist, it seems intuitive, everyone you talk to says it's going to be a good idea, it still doesn't guarantee success in the market, but it's a good start. So, if you have any questions related to product design or whether your idea is good enough to pursue, feel free to reach out to us at availcreative.com. We're happy to help.